You probably saw in the news that Donald Trump pardoned a turkey the other day.
It's very important. You are hereby unconditionally pardoned.
It's a tradition, but a lot of people find it dumb, myself included. Sasha and Malia Obama infamously didn't love the spectacle when their dad was president. I mean, look at them.
Time flies, even if turkeys don't.
I don't blame them. The reason many people find the turkey pardon empty and meaningless is that there are a ton of actual human beings seeking and awaiting clemency from the president. People who could really use some mercy these days. Their names are a matter of public record. The Justice Department keeps a spreadsheet on its website of all the pending clemency applications. As of this moment, more than 18,000 people are waiting for the president to act. Of those, 15,000 filed their clemency applications this year alone. Worse yet, since Trump took office a second time, he's completely transformed this constitutional power into something that's more like a vending machine, a tool to reward friends and allies, and those who have the connections and the means to give the president something in return. The system is clearly broken. The presidential pardon is broken. You might even say the Constitution is broken, because if the president can get away with corruptly pardoning cronies, family members, or even co-conspirators, then what are we even doing here? And if thousands upon thousands languish in prison without a real meaningful shot at a second chance, then there's no doubt we live in a two-tier justice system. And don't get me started on the Supreme Court's immunity decision, which effectively and preemptively pardoned a president for a failed attempt to overthrow our democracy. Something's deeply, deeply broken here, and we need to fix it. Before I tell you how things have gone off the rails and how pardons ought to work in a real justice system, I thought I'd give you a quick rundown of how presidential clemency works, and then a lightning-fast history of how we got here. First, the Constitution. In Article 1, Section 2 of the document, it says that the president shall have the power to grant reprieves and pardons for offenses against the United States, except in cases of impeachment. This is a sweeping power. In practice, it means the president can offer clemency only for federal crimes, not state crimes. That clemency may include full pardons or sentence commutations, which means modifying or shortening someone's punishment, kind of like when President Biden commuted the sentences of almost everyone on death row. These folks will remain in prison for life, but the federal government won't execute them. That's a form of mercy. Another limitation in the text: the president can't pardon people who have been impeached. The real point of this power is to check the overreach by the other branches. By legislators who create laws imposing draconian sentences, by prosecutors who oftentimes seek the longest sentence possible under the law, and even by judges who sometimes get carried away with the punishments they impose. At its most noble, the pardon power is an equalizer, a way to seek mercy after a punishment no longer serves a legitimate purpose. Over time, courts have understood the pardon power to have some limits. You can't pardon someone for future acts, only past conduct qualifies. The pardon must be accepted by its recipients, or else it doesn't count. And the pardon doesn't erase the record of conviction. It doesn't blot out history. We saw a version of this reality earlier this year when Donald Trump, on his first day back in office, issued a blanket grant of clemency to everyone convicted in connection to the January 6th attack on the Capitol. At least one woman rejected the offer. And although this blanket show of clemency was outrageous enough, the judges who were then charged with dismissing some of the pending cases at the time made it plain that the fact of a pardon doesn't change what happened. One judge called Trump's announcement of the pardons a revisionist myth. Judges have also resoundingly rejected that you can extend January 6 pardons to other crimes unrelated to the riot, or to offenses that arose or were discovered after that investigation. Given that reality, Trump recently had to issue a second pardon to a Capitol rioter who was under investigation for illegally possessing firearms. No comment. And courts have not addressed, and I hope they never do, whether a president can issue a self-pardon, which was a big question during Trump's first presidency. He even tweeted about it. Putting all of that aside, the biggest open question for the future and health of our democracy isn't the pardon power itself, which is good, but how to rein in or prevent corrupt pardons, or pardons that so shock the conscience that they shouldn't be allowed. We've had a share of those in our nation's history. From Gerald Ford pardoning Richard Nixon, to Bill Clinton pardoning billionaire Mark Rich, who fled the country before facing the justice system, to Joe Biden pardoning his son, Hunter, before he left office. Devin had some strong words for that last pardon. And of course, the blanket January 6 pardons. Needless to say, the pardon power has been abused. But we'd be remiss if we didn't make clear that this moment feels different, and how uniquely self-serving and unmoored from justice Trump's pardons have been. They're truly unlike nothing in our nation's history.
Sorry to interrupt, but with so many convicted criminals going free, now's probably a good time to wipe all your personal and private information off the internet. Your cell phone number, home address, email address, private social media accounts, and tons of other sensitive data are shockingly easy to purchase by anyone online. But malicious actors can't hurt you if they can't find you. So you can fight back and take control of your private information by signing up for today's sponsor, Incogni. Because Incogni wipes your personal data from the internet by searching the internet, reaching out to data brokers and websites directly on your behalf, and forcing them to remove your private information. If they resist, Incogni will take care of that too, because Incogni fights back. But what makes Incogni truly powerful in taking back control of your privacy is the custom removals feature. It allows you to flag an unlimited number of sites where your data is exposed, and you can even have Incogni's privacy experts review and tackle the most uncooperative data brokers and people search sites. Now, I've been using Incogni for years now, and in that time you can see I've been on hundreds of lists, some of which had a high sensitivity score, meaning the broker had tons of data on me. Luckily, Incogni has completed hundreds of takedowns for me in that time. Now, I could never do this myself, so thank you to Incogni for weeks worth of work and adding me to over 40 suppression lists. And Incogni will continue to conduct ongoing removals, because even if the broker removes your data once, they can always collect it and publish it again. So if online privacy is important to you, give Incogni a try. If you scan the code on screen or click on the link in the description, you'll get 60% off their unlimited annual plan. Or you can try Incogni risk-free for 30 days, and if you do decide to keep it, you'll still get the 60% off discount so long as you use my code LegalEagle, all one word. So sign up for Incogni, or I'll see you in court.
Back in 2017, when many of us were younger and less gray, and I'm pretty gray right now, I covered my first ever Trump pardon. The one he gave Arizona Sheriff Joe Arpaio. Crazy Joe. It made me furious. The headline I wrote at the time speaks for itself. This was his first pardon ever. The reason that pardon stuck in my craw was not that Trump had just rewarded one of his biggest campaign supporters. That was kind of expected. But the fact that he pardoned someone who had just been convicted of criminal contempt of court. Now, for someone to be charged with a crime for contempt of court is a really high bar. It's not easy to get there. And in this case, Trump's own Justice Department had prosecuted Arpaio for not following court orders. What orders? You won't believe this, or maybe you will, but a federal judge had ordered Arpaio's Sheriff's Department to not be racist, to not cosplay as federal immigration agents. That is, to not stop and detain people simply because the officers believed that they're here illegally. Now, does that sound familiar? Arpaio directed his deputies to ignore the court, and they went on to illegally detain at least 171 people over 18 months. Think about that. A law enforcement officer ordered to stop violating people's civil rights, and his response was no. So, the pardon to me stood for the idea that racially profiling people for being Latino is just fine. That you can even ignore a judge who tells you to stop doing that. Devin also has some thoughts about that. Of course, that was only the beginning. In his first term alone, Trump's use and abuse of the pardon power stood out because even then, there was a method to the madness. The Washington Post described it as a cottage industry. That is, the more powerful and well-connected and wealthy you were, the likely you were to get on the president's radar and receive mercy. I won't go through the list of all his first-term pardons, but among them were people that helped Trump get elected or who worked for him in the Oval Office. People like Roger Stone, Paul Manafort, Steve Bannon, and Michael Flynn. There was Jared Kushner's dad, Charles Kushner, who, by the way, is now an ambassador. He also pardoned a whole bunch of Republican congressmen, and only men. And who can forget about a group of Blackwater security guards convicted for murdering Iraqi civilians, including children, in what is now known as the Nisour Square Massacre. Now, during Trump's first term, he pardoned a total of 238 people. Pretty stingy, all things considered. But in the first 10 months of his second term, he's already at nearly 2,000. The vast majority of these, by far, are the pardons and commutations for the attack on the Capitol, which included members of the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers, whom, by the way, he singled out by name in his proclamation, and some of whom were serving lengthy sentences. And like during his first term, there's now what the Wall Street Journal calls a wild west of presidential pardons, one in which the Justice Department is no longer part of the equation, and where having friends or lobbyists in high places is all that matters. This is how Liz Oyer, the career pardon attorney Trump fired for declining to restore Mel Gibson's gun rights, has described the current regime.
I understood that clemency was going to be conducted entirely out of the White House without input from the Office of the Pardon Attorney. This was a departure from over 100 years of practice. The Office of the Pardon Attorney has been sort of an independent advisor on clemency, and this was a major departure from how clemency has always been conducted and from the norms that have generally governed that process.
What's curious about this new arrangement is that the new pardon attorney is someone well known to this channel, in part because of his avian nickname, Eagle et Martin. A Trump loyalist who has been behind the political prosecutions of James Comey and Letitia James. By the way, those were recently dismissed. He is now a key figure in this wild, wild west for pardons. Mind you, he got the job after not even Republicans could stomach his nomination to be the top federal prosecutor in Washington. They approved TV host Judge Jeanine Pirro instead, which, don't get me started. After the president pardoned a Trump-loving sheriff in May, Ed Martin posted on X, "No MAGA left behind." The sheriff's offense and sentence, conspiracy to commit bribery, for which he received 10 years in federal prison. What's remarkable about Ed Martin saying the quiet part out loud is that he's making it clear who's eligible for justice and mercy in Trump's Washington. In a post immediately following his "No MAGA left behind" sentiment, Ed Martin posted the text of a bizarre presidential proclamation purporting to pardon everyone involved in the 2020 fake elector scheme. You know, that thing where a bunch of MAGA loyalists in the states cooked up a plan to serve as alternative electors and thus throw the election to Trump. Among them are Rudy Giuliani, Mark Meadows, Jeffrey Clark, and other two-bit players in the bigger plot to overturn the 2020 election. The move is bizarre because it has no force of law. There are no past or present federal prosecutions against these people, and Trump can't pardon state crimes, as I said before. This is how one former public corruption prosecutor at DOJ put this brave new world we're in. A pardon is supposed to be for somebody who has paid his debt to society and is remorseful or to right an injustice. It's not for the highest bidder. Speaking of, Liz Oyer, the fired pardon attorney, added up the totals in fines and restitution that those offered clemency would have had to pay if their punishments hadn't been wiped away.
Donald Trump has now forgiven over $1.3 billion in debts owed to victims of white-collar crime using his pardon power.
Democratic staff on the House Judiciary Committee came up with a slightly larger figure, $1.3 billion. That report is worth reading, if only to get a sense of how much lawlessness and thievery these pardons wiped out. To add insult to injury, many of these people were already wealthy to begin with, or else have been convicted of stealing from the U.S. Treasury or from private individuals. Some of them were proud donors to Trump or other GOP campaigns. And did I mention that Trump is also pardoning corporations? That's right. HDR Global Trading, a cryptocurrency exchange that goes by BitMEX, got a full and unconditional pardon from the president. A legal expert who wrote a book on the presidential pardon wrote that the pardon may have made history because it wasn't given to a person, but to a private entity that's, in essence, a creature of statute, a legal fiction. The pardon effectively wiped out a $100 million fine the crypto exchange got for violating anti-money laundering laws. And since we're talking crypto, the corrupt pardon everyone is talking about these days is the one Changpeng Zhao got. He is the founder of Binance, the world's largest cryptocurrency exchange. Under the Biden administration, the government went after him and his company from all sides. The Treasury Department, DOJ, and the Commodity Futures Trading Commission all sought to hold Binance accountable for violating laws against money laundering and sanctions. Here's what Janet Yellen, the former Treasury Secretary, said about what Binance was caught doing. Binance turned a blind eye to its legal obligations in the pursuit of profit. Its willful failures allowed money to flow to terrorists, cybercriminals, and child abusers through its platform. Binance was, as the Wall Street Journal called it, a giant money laundering mill. The company was fined a historic $4 billion plus penalties, and Zhao was prosecuted, convicted, and imprisoned for 4 months for his failure to maintain an effective anti-money laundering program. He was also slapped with a $50 million fine. Peanuts for someone like him. His net worth is reportedly around $80 billion. But then Trump zooped into office, and Zhao, through paid lobbyists, worked hard for a pardon. According to Politico, Binance paid a lobbyist and a hunting buddy of Donald Trump Jr. a whopping $450,000 for 1 month's work of, quote, executive relief. Yet the lobbying, direct or indirect, lasted for way longer than a month. According to the Journal, around the time Trump won the election last year, Binance got to work and formed a task force to strike a deal with the Trump family's growing crypto venture, World Liberty Financial. The goal was to use that deal as leverage for a Zhao pardon. Then this past spring, boom, Binance took steps that catapulted the Trump family's venture's new stablecoin product, enhancing its credibility and pushing its market capitalization up from $127 million to over $2.1 billion. So Binance, in effect, helped make the Trump family richer. The full Journal report is worth reading in full, just so you get a sense of the depth and breadth of this corruption. The Journal, which is not prone to hyperbole, noted that the pardon marks the most distinct instance yet of Trump using the powers of his office to benefit someone at the center of deals that have enriched his family. When asked about all this, Trump distanced himself from Zhao, whom he said he didn't know. And he called his and his company's punishments a Biden witch hunt. So Biden made you do a corruption. Makes a lot of sense. If by now you're growing disillusioned about the pardon power, well, you should be. It's a great power found in the Constitution, designed to correct grave injustices, but there's very little courts or Congress can do about it when it's misused and abused. You may recall from the Supreme Court's terrible immunity decision that this constitutional power is conclusive and preclusive, meaning neither lawmakers nor judges may second-guess the president's actions in this area. That's a terrible place to be in. It's terrible for democracy, the rule of law, and people's ability to hold their leaders accountable. But that doesn't mean we can't do anything about it. In fact, long before Trump began using the pardon power like a vending machine, there were people thinking and strategizing about how to fix the pardon power. The most obvious and difficult path is by constitutional amendment. Shortly before Trump took office, Congressman Steve Cohen of Tennessee saw the writing on the wall. He sensed the January 6 pardons were coming, so he introduced an amendment that would effectively outlaw self-pardons and pardons on family members, administration officials, and campaign employees. The proposal would also bar any pardons for self-serving reasons, including for offenses motivated by a direct and significant personal or pecuniary interest of the president or any of his close associates, or for an offense that was at the direction or in coordination with the president. That language strikes at the heart of the January 6 pardons. Lastly, the amendment proposal makes clear that any pardon issued for a corrupt purpose shall be invalid. So a constitutional amendment would be ideal. And I truly believe this should be nonpartisan. No one should want the president using this great power for his own benefit or to help family, friends, and allies. But there's much more that could be done. What about the thousands upon thousands of people who want mercy but don't have the power and access to the president? Professor Rachel Barco, who teaches at NYU Law School, has argued for a long time that the clemency system is completely broken. She argues that one of the greatest sins of the current pardon process is that it's run by federal prosecutors, and has been for quite some time. Imagine that. The very people whose job is to seek indictments, convictions, and long prison sentences are then charged with reviewing and recommending to the White House who is worthy to receive clemency. What sense does that make? As Professor Barco has documented, even during the Obama years, where the president granted a record-breaking number of clemency applications, the system was basically a mercy lottery. She literally uses those words. Too many people were ignored and their clemency applications were never reviewed. That's true of both Democratic and Republican administrations. Professor Barco's main prescription, what she calls a better machine of mercy, the number one thing to fix it, is just to take the Justice Department out of the pardon business altogether. Prosecutors, who are punitive by nature, have no business granting mercy. It's a huge conflict of interest. Barco says it's much better to give the task to an independent advisory body with resources, which can then move quickly through the backlog of applications and begin recommending candidates for clemency. In other words, make the office of the pardon attorney an independent entity. That's exactly how President Ford did it when he issued mass clemency to service members who deserted during the Vietnam War, as well as to draft evaders. The announcement was controversial at the time, but its motives were pure: to achieve national healing after a traumatic, historic event. As a result, tens of thousands became eligible for clemency. DOJ couldn't handle them all, so Ford set up a presidential clemency board to process those eligible. The program didn't reach everyone, but it did reach some 13,000 people in a relatively short period of time. That's about the size of the current backlog. But the independence and expertise of this board is key. Whoever is recommending clemency should be insulated from political pressure and go by objective, transparent criteria. No more of these backroom deals, extra legal requirements, or having friends in high places to get your application noticed. No more pardons for the highest bidder. More fundamentally, we're all human, and we all have needed mercy at some point in our lives. None of us is the sum of the worst things we've ever done. We need to move away from this mentality that there are people more worthy or deserving than others, that there are truly exceptional people who deserve an exceptional grant of clemency. If the current system has shown us anything, it is that the only exceptional ones these days are those with money and access and connections to the president. But that's not the world we want. We want a world where everyone plays by the same rules and where everyone can make a case for themselves on their own terms based on who they are today. No special access required. That means opening ourselves up to the idea of mass clemency, of the kind that Presidents Ford and Carter made possible. Those should be within reach. And this should go for states too, which are the true drivers of our national crisis of mass incarceration. Governors, like the president, have broad clemency powers, and they should be exercising them with an eye towards correcting past injustices. When the framers of the Constitution spoke of the pardon power, they never spoke of the corrupt regime we have now. They didn't set it up so a president could then reward friends or stick it to the previous president or his policies. The point was justice. I'll leave you with Alexander Hamilton in Federalist 74. The language is a little old-timey, but please bear with me for a minute. He wrote, "Humanity and good policy conspire to dictate that the benign prerogative of pardoning should be as little as possible fettered or embarrassed. The criminal code of every country partakes so much of necessary severity that without an easy access to exceptions in favor of unfortunate guilt, justice would wear a countenance too sanguinary and cruel." In today's language, the real point of the pardon power is, and has always been, to wipe away injustice.
A quick update. Yes, it actually gets worse. Since Christian recorded this, even more unhinged pardon news has just dropped. First, Trump issued a full federal pardon to Texas Congressman Henry Cuellar, who was facing charges for bribery, conspiracy, and money laundering. The DOJ indicted Cuellar for allegedly taking hundreds of thousands of dollars from foreign-linked interests tied to Azerbaijan and Mexico in exchange for political favors. But his slate is now wiped clean. And if you thought, hey, that's weird that Trump would pardon a Democrat, well, what did Trump think he was getting out of the deal? Well, apparently he thought Cuellar would not run again, at least not as a Democrat. But as Cuellar accepted the pardon and then announced he would seek re-election as a, quote, good old conservative Democrat, Trump ripped Cuellar and his family for not sticking to the apparently corrupt deal that Trump thought he had arranged. Quote, only a short time after signing the pardon, Congressman Henry Cuellar announced that he will be running for Congress again in the great state of Texas as a Democrat, continuing to work with the same radical left scum that just weeks before wanted him and his wife to spend the rest of their lives in prison, and probably still do. So if you're keeping score at home, Trump pardoned Cuellar to either prevent a Democrat from running again or for him to switch to a Republican if he did run. Just unconscionable. And then Trump announced he was pardoning Tina Peters, the former Mesa County, Colorado clerk, convicted and serving a lengthy state sentence for tampering with voting machines and related election tampering offenses as part of the efforts tied to Trump's bogus 2020 fraud claims. His pardon, though, is a legal nullity thanks to Article 2 of the Constitution, which limits the president's pardon power to offenses against the United States. This means that the pardon power extends to federal crimes only. Peters was convicted under state law, so the pardon effectively does nothing. It has the same legal effect as amending the Constitution via Truth Social. So now we've officially gone from controversial pardons to pretrial pardons to imaginary pardons. What comes next? Well, maybe Trump will finally be the guy to attempt to self-pardon. Now, all this highlights why it's so important to get a great lawyer when you're dealing with your own case. Now, after I started this channel, every week I'd get hundreds of comments and emails from viewers who are dealing with legal problems, and they'd ask, can you help me find a lawyer? How do I know if this attorney is any good? And there's a massive gap in our justice system. It's that people don't know how to find the right lawyer for their specific situation. They're scared, they're overwhelmed, and they end up doing nothing or hiring the first attorney who calls them back. And that really bothered me. So I started to wonder, what if there was a different way? What if we could build a law firm that actually lived up to the values that I talk about on this channel? Transparency, accessibility, and putting clients first instead of chasing billable hours. A firm where you don't need to pay anything up front, and your lawyers only get paid if you do to maximize your opportunity for justice. So a few years ago, I decided to fix that problem. I decided to start my own personal injury law firm. And honestly, it wasn't an easy choice. But I realized I was in this unique position. I had this platform, this community, and the experience. Not to get rich, trust me, there are easier ways to make money than starting a law practice. But we did it because access to justice shouldn't be a luxury. Because finding the right legal representation shouldn't feel like playing Russian roulette with your future. And when you work with my firm, you're not just getting a lawyer. You're getting a team that understands that behind every case is a real person with real stakes. If we can't represent you or you're in a state where we don't practice, we'll take the time to try to match you with an attorney in my personal network of lawyers. A national network of some of the best lawyers in the country who actually specialize in what you're going through, located right where you are, not just whoever happens to be available. So if you're dealing with a personal injury, a car crash, a data breach, sexual harassment, a social security or workers' comp issue, give us a call at the number on screen or click on the link below. Now, I can't represent everyone that watches this channel. I wish I could, but what I can do is make sure that when you need legal help, you have somewhere to turn to that you can trust. So whether it's me handling your case or the incredible attorneys we partnered with, you'll get the same principles of honesty and education that we bring to every video. And if you're dealing with a legal issue and you're not sure where to start, check out the link in the description. Let's have a conversation about how we can help you find not just a lawyer, but the right lawyer for your situation. Because at the end of the day, that's what this is all about, making sure that when life gets complicated, you don't have to face it alone. Which is why when you need a lawyer, you don't just need a legal team, you need the Eagle team.